Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Field Stories. No, I'm not stuck in a time warp. And these guys decided they would change clothes and not tell me, even though we're recording this on the same day. So I've been left out of this one. We agreed to stay.
I thought that you would
Uh,
footy and you would
yeah.
shower after, or
I
something
didn't.
and
No,
I
he
didn't
change.
just
have. I watched
Nick just
football. I wasn't that
yeah,
interested.
he just watched football
Oh,
and
I
just
didn't
I
have
probably
to
don't
drank
shower
a
after
know.
beer.
watching football, but
Sometimes I can't
Yeah.
understand,
So I at least changed shirt to
lingo.
try and pretend that I'm wearing. I'm not going to
yeah.
talk about whether
See,
I changed.
authentic here, authentic.
Pants
They're all
not that I
the
changed my
I
fakers.
was
shirt.
cold.
Michaela changed her shirt. There you go.
Yeah, because I have to
Um,
have like multiple outfit changes throughout the day,
you know,
As being a scientist, I can be bougie too. It's okay.
I have to have the
I
I'm
same
mean,
classy.
attire all times.
I changed because it's getting hot here in Lima and I have no pants on right now, so I
Gosh.
changed in that way as well. So there you go.
I always wonder what you
But
guys wear for like pants in an interview. Like, do you
Doesn't
have
yeah,
matter.
pants
usually I have
or?
It
pants
doesn't.
on, but like
It
this
doesn't
time I
matter.
don't. But yeah, it depends. It depends. You never
Not
know,
that I'm
right?
wondering. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
Oh god.
Anyways, so we're still in the same place as we were in the last episode,
Mm.
which is I'm still in Lima and Mikel is still in beautiful, beautiful, warm Michigan, and Nick is still in his
Spinning Finland.
slightly more green cave with his new co-host and
I
plant.
There's
So
life in
New
here. It's
co-host.
nice.
there's
So it
life.
doesn't look like your mom's basement
Exactly.
anymore.
No, I
It's
know.
Yeah.
your
It looks
mom's
like in
basement
my
with a plant.
basement.
Yeah, your basement.
Yeah,
You
I've
stepped into the life of
personalized
the
it.
basement and brought it to it. Yeah.
Personalized it.
Well,
Yeah, well, I
today
think this is
we
probably the most. Sorry, I was just gonna say
no
probably the
no go
most
go
amount of
go.
time we've spent together in one day as a like
So chaotic.
all
This is
three of
true.
us.
This is true.
And it is
Yeah.
it's showing. It's showing.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody wondering, yeah, it's going. Yeah, it's almost over, Nick. You'll be done with me soon.
Oh.
For anyone wondering, and I don't think anyone is, but I'm going to explain it anyways. For anyone wondering why we're doing 2-in-1 that day, it's because pretty soon we're going to be super crazy busy and in different places. So I'll be back into the jungle in a couple weeks, and I know in the future, Nick, you maybe later you can tell us, but you might not be in England finally soon. And
Yeah, can't
Michaela,
wait, can't
well, you'll still be in Michigan, but the rest of us will be doing things that are interesting in the
Okay,
next 2 weeks.
listen, I was thinking about going to Costa Rica pretty soon, so maybe Costa
Costa Rica.
Rica. All right.
very
Yeah.
good.
So
Yeah.
we are stacking up. Yeah, we're stacking up an episodes so that we have a fallback in case something happens, or in case massive technical difficulties fail us again. And I
Again.
think we actually did pretty well in this episode with
Yeah, this
regards to
episode was.
Besides a phantom vacuum.
yeah,
Can I
yeah.
say
Just
it
keep
was
that
no technical
that
issues?
back later on, but you'll know what I
Yeah.
mean when it happens. But so, anyways, yes, our guest today. Let's try this again. Is Nils Bouillard. Bouillard. I can't say it. He'll say it better at the end.
Booyah. Booyah.
Bouillard.
Booyah.
It's not Booyah. It's not.
It's
Booyah.
Bouillard.
Nils Bouillard.
Bouillard.
Bouillard. Okay. It's French. I can't pronounce it. I'm not going to pretend I can. But Nils
Call
is
him your friend too.
honestly, Nils is probably the most intelligent person that I know. To be honest, he's incredible to talk to, and he knows a lot about everything. But his expertise is definitely bats, and specifically, I suppose, bat acoustics. And he's also currently the world record holder for most bat species seen in a single year. He had his big bat year in 2019, 400 species, and that's how I was fortunate enough to cross paths with him and meet him. And yeah, he's going to be a great guest and talk a lot about his bat year and also about bats in general and IDing them, and then share some different stories about his time traveling. So yeah, I think it'll be a really cool episode. Hope everyone enjoys it. All right, so today our guest is Nils Bouillard, and I'm not French, so if I butchered the last name a bit, I apologize, but I did my best. And I'm sure you've heard worse, so we're just going to go with that. Nils and me met during his big bat year, actually, when he was, I guess, from our point of view, and hopefully his point of view, fortunate enough to join us in Peru in the Peruvian Amazon on his first and only Amazonian stop, actually, if I'm not wrong in that. Definitely first, I think. And yeah, I mean, it was a great time. It was a short time, but it was an awesome time within there, and we've maintained a really good friendship. I'd like to say since then, and yeah, I'm really excited to have him on the show. Yeah, yeah, hit and miss. I understand. Yeah, really excited to
We
have him on the
feel
show
that.
today to share. Yeah, all of them know what that's like. Yeah, friendship and me, you know. But yeah, we're really happy to have you on, Nils, to talk about yeah, a little bit about the Big Bat Year. Obviously, we got to talk about that in your new book, but also to talk a bit about what you're doing now, and then yeah, we'll just go from there. You're the second bat focused guest we've had on. So we had Dana Green on a few weeks ago, and so yeah, you're the second batty kind of guest we've had on. So I think Michaela and Nick will still have some potentially basic questions about bats for you. So yeah, man, go ahead. Just give us some background about yourself and whatever you feel like sharing.
Thank you. So, yeah, I like bats. Hello. Um,
Hello.
so I've been working with bats for quite a while now, and I'm mostly interested in the acoustic side of things. I know many people who work with bats enjoy trapping them, enjoy seeing them in the hand. I I don't mind leaving recorders out at night, not seeing bats, and then analyzing the recordings on my computer. I enjoy that. Um, and so I'm able to do that professionally, which then also funds my ability to do that for fun in regions where no one does it. So recently, I've had a project in Seychelles. I had no external funding, but I was able to get a project started. Essentially, what I did was show the relevance and usefulness of the method. And now there's multiple teams developing projects using acoustics in Seychelles.
Oh, awesome.
So that's kind of what I do professionally. And then, yeah, like Chris mentioned, it kind of all kicked off in 2019 when I did the Big Bat Year. So the concept of Big Year is popular with birders, where essentially you choose a region, could be your garden, from your garden to the world, anything in between. And from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, you try to see as many species as possible. And a few people had done that with birds worldwide, and it gave them a platform to talk about, I don't want to say obscure, but less known conservation projects. I thought that was really cool because it was a different way of talking about stuff. And it was also talking about conservation with a very positive, in a positive way, which is not always the case, because always we're trying to save stuff because everything's dying. But that kind of, it's true, but sometimes it's good to also get a little bit of positive in there. And I thought that the big years were good with that. And a friend of mine joked that I should do it for bats, and I thought, it's stupid. And then a couple of years later, I thought, actually, it's a pretty good idea. And I decided to go for it. And yeah, that was it was tough. But I met so many people around the world. And in many ways, it's also made my career decisions for me because I have expertise with bat acoustics basically everywhere now. So I can get contracts basically everywhere, which is fun because that's what I want to do, is travel for work with bats. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I think probably the prime questions are then, how many did you see and how many places did you go? What were the numbers?
So I went to 29 countries.
Wow.
I saw. So actually, because I also counted the species I only recorded, as in sound recorded,
Yeah.
I don't actually know how many I saw. I could get that number from an Excel spreadsheet, but I know I photographed 156, and so the whole total number is 400. I have sound recordings of around 250 and photos of around 150.
That's
So
amazing.
number seen is probably between 250 and 150.
Bro,
Incredible.
that's
Somewhere there.
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So many.
So how did you pick the locations? You know, what locations popped out to you? And, were you funded through this? Was this all your own kind of funding? How did you kind of go about this? I mean, 29 countries is incredible to travel and look for bats, but obviously there's more into it. I'd like to hear kind of like the process of how you chose and how you kind of set up, your boxes and all of that.
So, to answer the second question first, it was all self-funded with help from family, but
Wow.
no external source of funding. One thing that helped was, so with birding trips, usually you hire guides to help you find birds, because that's basically the only way you can rack up as many species as is required for the competitiveness of the big year. I was not competing with anyone. I was only competing with myself, so I didn't have that pressure. But also, there's no guides you can hire. So compared to a bird big year, mine cost pennies. Because it's not, I mean, some of the big years were working with budgets around, what was it, $300 a day, something like that. I was
Wow.
well below that. And so it was a good thing for money reasons, but a bad thing because I always had to find locations myself. I had to just come up with ideas myself. I couldn't really rely on someone else. There were some places where I could rely on other people, and that's why I went to join Fauna Forever for a little bit, because that kind of helped me as well, just to take the pressure off finding locations, trapping stuff. But yeah, so to find locations, the way I approached it kind of shifted. At the start, I was relying on papers, some trip reports, but I quickly realized that a lot of them were not that reliable in their identifications. There was a lot of wishful thinking. Oh, this is orange and this must be rare. So actually, no, it's not that, but yeah, sure. So once I realized that, I basically didn't use trip reports at all anymore. Beyond just, this has a bat cave. It's probably good. I'm not going to rely on what the report says is in the bat cave, but hey, it's a bat cave. And also to get contact details of people, stuff like that. But then otherwise it was just papers, and I would just get GPS coordinates from papers or just get a rough idea of what species is in that woodland or whatever. And the issue with that is, GPS coordinates only get you so far. So there was this one place in Mexico. I thought, this cave is amazing. It's got basically all of the bats in the southwest. And I got to the location, but there was no cave because, I was at the top of the cliff and the cave was at the bottom of the cliff. And there was no way to get down without dying. So I was at the right location, just not. So there's definitely some shortcomings by using GPS coordinates, and that's kind of when I started shifting to relying more on people. So I realized that targeting the most diverse areas probably was not the best bet, and a better bet would be to target an area where there's already people doing the work. Even if it has fewer species, I'm more likely to get them because there's people there. And in a similar way, that also... So I did spend more time on islands than people normally do for bird big years, because my reasoning was there's not that many species on those islands, but I should be able to identify every one of them. Whereas in highly diverse areas, there's species, especially based on acoustics, you just can't identify.
Right.
So knowing, hey, if I go to this island, there's several islands, there's maybe only 9 species, but I should be able to get them in a couple of days and ID them all, which you can't necessarily say for many other areas. So that's kind of it, I think.
Yeah,
that was great.
Pretty good. I guess just continuing on the big bat year before we move on to anything else. I wanted, we've talked about it a bit, you and me, but I wonder if you could elaborate more on your experiences with, I guess, bat conservation, and maybe a little more directly, how people view bats across the world. Because if you have 29 different countries, there's so many different cultures, so many different continents, and we know bats are often viewed as these dark, disease, ugly rats with wings, which is horrible and not true, as we know. But a lot of people in the world can think that. At least that's the perception that people have about people in the world. So with you having such a diverse experience across the world, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that and how bats are viewed across the world, and kind of any thoughts about the conservation efforts across the world to help protect them.
So I want to preface this by saying that I only met a finite number of people. So my perception may not be accurate. But the perception I had was that people were relatively neutral towards bats, as in they considered them to be like any other animal in the forest. Outside of countries that were colonized by European countries, especially sort of British / any kind of Western. Didn't feel as much in sort of Spanish / Portuguese former colonies, but definitely sort of Australia, the US, all those countries are still heavily influenced by Western culture. So you do get that aversion towards bats, but in many other places, it's just another animal, which means in many places that they eat them because it's just another animal in the forest. But there's no, like I said, it's fairly neutral, which may or may not be good. But yeah, so in something I realized as well is I had an advantage over big ears in terms of finding locations, because I could just show up in villages, ask if they knew any bat caves. Because good luck asking people if they know where there's birds. That tree has birds, but you don't care because they're trash birds. But with bat caves, they'll show you bat caves. And in many places, people thought I was a bit weird for asking where the bat caves were. But from talking to them, it's not that they feared them or anything like that. It's not that they hated them or they thought they were dirty. It's just, that cave's got bats. So, yeah.
Cool.
That's good. Good to hear, actually.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I have just a slightly different question about the identification. At what point are you confident to say that you have a new species, or different species, I should say, not a new one? But when you're hearing the acoustics, you said it's very difficult to distinguish some of the species. Could you sort of let us know how and when you decide, actually, you know what, this is a different one, I can say I've now seen a different one? Or are you just leaving it sort of, some of them, I guess you just go, well, I can't do anything with that? Could you sort of elaborate on something along those lines?
It's it honestly depends on the specific cases, but I have many sequences that are still unidentified. I don't think I have pictures of bats I have not identified, but I've seen bats that I did not identify. So one thing I set as a rule at the start was that I would not count any bats in flight unless it was something like a flying fox, because flying foxes, you only see them flying, and they can absolutely be identified in flight. But anything small, I said no, because it's small and brown and fast, and it's small and brown and fast.
Could be anything.
LBJs.
Are you telling me you can't separate three pipistrelles by their flight patterns? Come on now, let's go. Just kidding.
I mean, you've got people claiming that they can, and then they can see the hair on the toes of the whatever. Wow. I'm not buying any of that. And also,
that's crazy.
So I was not competing with anyone. No one had done this before, so I could set my own rules. So I decided to be still fairly strict, mostly because I had to believe what I was saying, because there's no point in lying. So to go back to your question, when did I feel like I was confident enough? I am not personally a fairly critical person.
Mm-hmm.
And tend to be. I wasn't always like this. I've had a phase where I was fairly overconfident in my IDs, mainly with birds when I started, as many birds do. But then that kind of faded away. So yeah, when the ID didn't feel quite right, then I just left it
Ignored it. Yeah.
and just didn't count it, hoping that I would find the species again or different circumstances, things like that. In a number of cases, I asked people for confirmation as well. So one of the rules I had as well was that I had to be the one IDing the bats, or at least I would have to be able to ID the bat. It's not that someone's catching the bats, showing this is that, and just chucks it back into the air. I didn't want that. So obviously, yeah, when I was with other people, they could tell me, yeah, so these two species, you can't really separate them based on calls. So I would, even if they weren't there when I recorded them, I would go back and say, oh, okay, I can't actually distinguish those two. So yeah, let's just leave them. So in Taiwan, for example, I didn't get as many species as I could have because some of them are close to impossible to distinguish. In other cases, it's just when something felt consistently different, and that's kind of a good way of approaching acoustics, is looking at consistency. So because the range of calls of each species is huge, okay, because they have to adapt to environmental factors. They're not limited by the communication constraints because they're not trying to communicate. So they don't need to make sure that they can still be understood like you get with communication calls like bird calls. Because if birds started doing something completely wacky, it doesn't work for communication anymore because it's completely wacky. But with echolocation calls, you don't have that issue at all. It's completely dependent on the environment. So you have so many different calls that they can produce. And they are going to produce some weird stuff all the time. But if you have something that's consistently different from something else, it's probably something else. If you just have those three calls that are different, it doesn't mean anything. But as you start building up those sequences and those patterns, like, okay, this is most likely something else. What could it be? And that's kind of how I went with it. I'm not claiming that all my IDs are 100% accurate. So actually right now I'm going through my sequences to pull some sequences to upload to Xenocanto, which is a collaborative platform to share. It started with birds, but now they've added bats and crickets and other stuff. And not all my sequences will end up there because for some of them, I'm confident that's what it is, but I wouldn't want someone else to base their research on my assumption. So there is kind of a different level of, I don't know what to call it, but I'm being even more critical when uploading these recordings to Xenocanto. So I'll end up uploading, I think I've chosen 55 species. Well, I'm 100% confident that's what they are. There's probably more, but it's kind of to give an idea of the difference between what I consider acceptable for the big bat year and then what I consider to be research grade. There's still a difference there.
Okay, yeah, it's a big disparity. Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Cool. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this correctly. So across the span of the 29 countries, obviously you have areas where you're expecting to see certain species. Was there any surprises in any of the areas you visited of a lack or a presence of species and possibly an influence of external anthropogenic influences that maybe have influenced the absence of these in these areas? Were there any, big surprises, I suppose?
So one thing I should note is that I rarely spend much time in each area. So I rarely put any thought into the absence of anything because I mostly put it down to I wasn't there for long enough. But so I'm only going to talk about the surprises of the stuff I did find.
Okay.
as opposed to stuff I didn't find.
Sure.
One thing that surprised me a lot was how many cities have bats. I was able to find really cool bat species in cities. Now, I don't like cities. I'd rather be out there somewhere, not the jungle because I don't like the jungle, but out
In the
there,
country,
not cities, not
in the
jungle,
boonies.
in the mountains or desert. It's just Um, where was I going with this? Yes, but when you're traveling a lot and going from one country to another, you're kind of forced to spend some time in cities because transit and stuff. So I did try to find bats when I was stuck in cities, and I was honestly amazed to the point where every time I ended up in a new city, I thought, hey, let me go to the botanical gardens because those always have good bats, and then just go from there. Especially in Asia, where they tend to be open quite late, past sunset. You can actually look for bats in botanical gardens. And then even in the capital of Madagascar, I had a rare free-tailed bat. It's only known from about a dozen locations around the island. One of them is the capital city, and you can hear it even without a recorder. You can hear it at night. So that's really cool. I was not expecting to find as many bats in cities as I did. And then there's the more sort of obvious surprises. So I did discover a new bat species in West Papua, like completely new. It was confirmed. So I was with a guide who's a bird guide, but who got really into bats after our trip together. He went back and managed to photograph it, which confirmed that it was completely new. But even based on the recordings and based on what we saw, it just didn't match anything that is known from the region or any other region.
Wow.
And then, so in New Caledonia, there was this one species that had not been recorded since 2002. Now, there hadn't been that many people searching for it. Sorry, my vacuum just started.
I love it.
So this is the first technical issue. It's not our fault or
Is
the
it amazing?
platform.
Kind of a technical issue.
Another
That's
type of
amazing.
technology.
Like, that's a
Third-party
physical
Vacuum
issue.
just-
Yeah, it's
that's
8:30 here.
paranormal.
It's vacuum time. Sorry. So New Caledonia. Okay. There hadn't really been any surveys, and I was confident that it was a species that easy to ID based on acoustics, because it's the only member of its genus on the island, and I found it.
Cool.
So that was quite fun. And then other than that, it was a lot of the stuff was fairly surprising because I wasn't always sure what to expect. So obviously I knew which species were present, but I didn't know how realistic they were. So when I went to Taiwan, I thought, it would be really cool to see the barbicel and the long-eared bats because we have similar species here, but not quite the same, here being Europe. But I didn't know if those were doable. And I spent a couple of nights looking for them, didn't find them, and then I tried something else, and within 5 minutes of trying something new, I had both. And that was really cool. But it was unexpected in a way, but also it's Taiwan in the mountains, so
Sure.
Oh, well, that's really cool. I think I want to sort of wrap up this section before we get to the story with basically, could you explain the process of getting the audio recordings? Because I know people do it with birds as well. Is it a case of you leave it for a certain amount of time? Are you out with a detector? What could you please sort of explain what the process is for taking audio recordings, please?
So for the big bat year, again, one of the rules was I had to be present.
Yeah.
Because the best way to get an idea of what species are present in an area is to leave a box running for weeks and then analyze the thing. Because then you increase the probability of picking up anything in the area.
Mm-hmm.
But in the spirit of the big bat year, it didn't felt right to just leave a box there and then, I don't know, go party on the beach or something. And not that something I'd do. But the point is that yeah, I decided I had to be there. So I had a one of those microphones that you plug into your phone. I had a Nicometer Dutch actually. Um, it's really small. It's really it's nice to travel with. It's not the best microphone out there. It's never the point. The point is that you have it with you all the time, which is what
Okay.
I needed. And yeah, I was just getting recordings like that, and
Cool.
so it's fairly easy. And then you get a real-time spectrogram on your smartphone, which doesn't allow you to identify everything, but it's a good way of sort of pre. I like to use that so I have an idea of what I picked up. Okay, I have these three kinds of calls, and then I could start looking into the literature, and then obviously go back to a computer and do some more in-depth analysis. But it allows you to get sort of first impressions in the field, and that's kind of what I did. In some places, I was using passive recorders just to get data, but not specifically to use for the list. But
Cool.
now I use a lot more passive recorders because my goals have kind of changed. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Cool. Well, I would like to know more, a little bit more details of what you're doing now, but I know you're moving on to doing some work in the Middle East, correct? Is it? Do you just want to talk a little bit about what your sort of near term plans are? I know you have like a multi-year plan, like 4 or 5 years. So
I don't have a
it's
multi-year
a
plan.
long. Yeah, well, you have like I've seen your potential plans in the future, which are pretty impressive. But like, what's your sort of what's your next 6 to 12 months looking like, just briefly, to give people an idea what you're doing, and then we can move on to your story.
So my sort of big project for this year is to make progress, hopefully wrap up a sound library for the bats of Western Asia. So Western Asia defined as the Middle East plus Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, essentially. But even the definitions kind of changed. But yeah, so everything from Turkey to Afghanistan and then down to Yemen, that kind of triangle. Not that I would be able to go to all those countries, but the goal is to cover as many bat species as possible. Yeah, that's kind of the goal. I am getting paid for some of it through contracts in various countries around the Middle East. So yeah, clearly my focus is Western Asia now, because there's not many people working there, and I really enjoy the bats there. The thing that still strikes me is finding bats in the most, I don't know, it's basically the moon, except it's 50 degrees Celsius, and you have no idea what bats are even there. Like, why? It doesn't make any sense, but somehow they're there and they're loving it. And
Wow.
That's quality.
I quite respect that. Or you put out recorders in a cool reserve because staff is nice and they're excited, and they tell you, yeah, you should put recorders around those gaff trees because there might be bats, which is sound reasoning. And then so this is in the middle of the desert, okay? So this is nothing else than sand and a few trees, and then you end up recording bats that need caves to roost. There's no caves there. There's no caves within kilometers of there. I don't know where they come from. So this is really exciting.
Wow.
So yeah, in the short term, I am actually moving there. So I should be able to do some more work there because I'll be there. So that's quite exciting. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just highlights how much there still is to learn about bats across the world. I mean, there's been a lot of research in the last couple of decades, but there's still so much still to learn about, even basic things like, where do they roost? That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was awesome. I feel like we could just keep rattling off questions.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go to your story. I'm sure you had a lot of potential options, but yeah, I don't actually know. I can't remember if you told me what your story is going to be. So this is going to be new for me, because if you did, it just went right in my ear.
I don't think I told you. I'm not entirely sure what. So there's lots of stories in this one. And it's funny because this is written from my perspective. This is just me telling the story of my trips.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of bits where I start by saying that I did not tell my parents about that. And so when they read the book, they're like, "Oh,
Oh god.
you didn't tell us about this." But
Funny.
so the I don't know don't know if it's the coolest thing. Definitely the weirdest,
We like
in my
weird.
opinion, is that when planning my trip to Mexico, I got in touch with someone I did my master's with at Imperial, because I knew he had gone back to his master's thesis study site. And I thought, let me see if I can go ring some plovers with him. And he was really keen. I had kind of I had a vague. I thought it was in an area that was very much sort of cartel country, but didn't think much of it. He said, "Yeah, sure, you can come as whatever." And then we got there, and they started explaining to me kind of the unspoken arrangements that had been done to make sure that they were safe from cartel. So essentially, they knew a guy who knew a guy who was basically cartel. So they knew that they were there for birds. They were not DEA. It was all fine. But and then apparently they got notified that I was there. It was also fine. It was just a bit weird. And then we were having lunch one day, where apparently a police officer had been shot there a year before, something like that. And then, as you get out of that restaurant, you see a big Bentley drive by. You get constant reminders of where you are. And then you go to areas where, I recognize this name because I saw it on Netflix for some reason. And you go somewhere, you go trapping some bats, and then when you watch a documentary on El Chapo a bit later, you realize, that's actually really close to where they caught him. And stuff like that. It's like, this is interesting.
Oh my god.
And
Wow.
the motorway, you see those watch posts and stuff. So it all felt really real, while at the same time not really seeing any of the violence whatsoever. Which is a bit weird in a way. But yeah, it was. I felt safe. Probably wasn't as safe as it could have been. But I didn't really feel like worrying my parents with sort of telling them, "Oh yeah, I'm in this stand. You might have heard of it." So I thought just leaving it vague and trusting that they trust me, that I'm not being an idiot, was kind of what I was
Sounds good.
counting on, which worked fine.
Yeah,
That's great. That's so good.
That's great. What was there any particular region that you think you felt like the most unsafe in, or did you feel pretty safe at all times?
I never felt unsafe. Okay, there was one evening where I was not loving life, because we were in South Africa, and there's this one trodden bat called something, Cleotis percivali in Latin, Percival's trodden bat, something like that. Common names tend to be quite boring. So Cleotis has it's quite rare, and I kind of really wanted to record it. I was not hoping to see it. I was just hoping to record it. Now, given the frequency, you can only really hope to record it at 2, maybe 3 meters. So you kind of have to be right in front of it. So we went to this abandoned mine, gold mine. So there's a lot of abandoned gold mines because they were no longer profitable for big companies, but they're still being illegally, not without air quotes, they're being illegally mined by individuals because it's still profitable for them. But this leads to fairly violent interactions with law enforcement. So usually those miners are armed inside those tunnels. So when we get to said tunnel, the owner of the land tells us, there's a couple of guys in the tunnels, so be careful. And so we're standing there at the entrance of the tunnel. We're not going in because we're not that stupid, with the recorder. And as every minute goes by, you realize this is getting more and more dangerous by the second, because those people do need to come out at some point. And they may not like the sight of some people standing with weird technology gear in their hands. So I think we said 20 minutes before I said, yeah, we should probably go. So that is definitely one time I felt unsafe. But in Mexico, I didn't feel unsafe at all. Partly because I was with good friends, and just generally knowing that it was fine. But also, it was fun being able to go somewhere I probably wouldn't have been able to go as easily, just because I could tag along with people who were already there. And we could actually, because part of their field work was catching plovers at night, it was kind of already part of the schedule to do stuff at night. Because there's places where, sort of places where you shouldn't do all that much at night, because it is considered suspicious behavior. And it's neither side of the cartel wars enjoy suspicious behavior. So
that's true.
it was actually a unique opportunity to be able to do that. The tunnel in South Africa maybe doesn't feel like that much of a unique opportunity, because I think that was just pushing our luck a little bit, just for the one species. But yeah, no, I haven't really done anything stupid either, so to actually actively decide to put myself in harm's way. So I was supposed to go to Sri Lanka, but that was shortly after there was a terrorist attack. I was not worried about further terrorist attacks, but the government had imposed a ban on social media, including any messaging services. So I would have been there with no way of contacting people, which I did not feel comfortable with. So I skipped that. So there were still things like, I had thresholds of things I was willing to do for bats, and then stuff I was not willing to do for bats.
Sure.
No, that's smart. I think you're maybe you're just too smart to do some of the stupid things that some of us have done. I don't know. Well, that's awesome, Nils. So thank you for coming on and sharing that.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Really cool to have more info on your big bat year, and a bit more information about how you go about IDing these bats and being confident in that. As you and me know, that's a whole other conversation of that whole thresholds and decisions about bats and IDs and blah blah. It's another whole. That's a much more niche and nerdy topic. That's hours. Yeah, exactly. But no,
it
great.
actually would be a good way of getting people to sleep. So if you want to start podcasting people to sleep,
we can transform into a sleep podcast.
I'm tempted to ask what I'm guessing that species in Africa has a relatively high frequency of that species in Africa you were trying to go for.
Cleotis, it's the one that's above 200.
Yeah, there you go. So
it's
that's
the only one that makes it above 200.
And that's the niche nerdy stuff I'm talking about. The fact that what he said means that I know that is why we're saying it's super niche and nerdy and would put a lot of people to sleep. So there you go. So thanks again, Nils. That's awesome for doing it. Thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome.
So good. Where do we find your book? Where can people find
before
it?
you go.
So the book is published by Pelagic Publishing. You can get it directly from them if you are in the UK, the US, Canada. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, honestly, I recommend Amazon for all their flaws. They do help with distributions of obscure books like this. So usually you can get it for a good price on Amazon wherever you are. So that would be my recommendation.
And for those who are listening on Spotify, the book is called A Big Bat Year, a conservation story. And Nils, can you pronounce your name for everyone?
Yes, it's Bouillard. So in classic French fashion, half the letters are silent.
Sounds right.
My last name could be 5 letters, but it's not. It's 9 or something. For no reason. Other than French.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
All
definitely
right,
check
man.
out that
Well,
book, everyone.
yeah, I'm sure we'll post a link to we'll share it on our Instagram as well. And yeah, man, it was
Yeah.
great having you again. And we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you again soon in the future, hopefully.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
It
Yeah,
was
thank
fun.
you. It's nice meeting you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really nice
likewise.
meeting you.
Okay,
Cool.
thanks.
Bye,
Ciao.
everyone. Great. Well, that was great. What a wonderful talk from Nils. I'm sure that we learned so much, especially Nick and I, about
Oh my
bats,
God, yeah.
and just to hear an incredible journey of him dedicating a whole year to traveling the whole entire world just to see so many different bat species, which was fantastic. All on, pretty much the self-dime too. So that
Incredible.
was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
no,
everyone's dream to have one target animal or like family and just be able to go around the world and just track the different ones. Like,
Turtles.
yeah, exactly. That was for you,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
honestly,
Like,
I just need
wow.
to get some sponsors just to fund my trip to do a whole world. All right, if any sponsors are hearing me right
The
now,
big turtle, yeah,
also,
amazing.
yeah, big turtle year for Michaela, big turtle year, and then I could write a book on it, and then we can talk about it. So if anyone's hearing this right now, I'll be
yeah.
here.
I was thinking that no one's ever done a big herp year actually, so that's
I know.
quite interesting actually. But yeah, need to like you said, if somebody wants to sponsor me as well, I'm good to go with that. But
We'll do it. Field stories
yeah.
turtle. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, we like Michaela, you and me can go do the IDing, and Nick can document it. There you go. It's field stories.
Oh my
Field
gosh.
stories.
It's
Big
done.
herp year.
Nick, can you get a company to support you and then
Yes.
vicariously through
Yes,
us?
by
You know?
putting this out now,
When we get
yes.
to 500,000 followers, I'll get on that. No worries.
This is going to be
Yeah.
on your shoulders, Nick.
Yeah.
Now.
But,
A
Wow.
lot of
I'm not.
but yeah, no,
I can.
yeah, it was interesting listening to him talk about the differences between doing a big bird year and a big bat year, though, as well. It's
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's interesting
100%.
not having anything to shoot for, because big bird, for those people who don't know, big years in birds is it's become quite competitive in the last I don't know, decade, two decades, and it's like you said, they're often planned with like real like militaristic planning and regiments, and
Mm.
it's so complicated, and you're competing against other numbers, and it's almost too intense. Like I don't think I would want to take on competing against someone else's number that's already there. But I think it's really interesting that he did it for the first time that anyone's done it, and chose a group that really no one's ever thought to do that with them. So it was really interesting, and it's really cool that he's been able to sort of take that as a springboard into forming his own career. And also, doing a lot of really interesting work. I mean, he's helped me up here in Peru, and his biggest issue is just too many things to do, which is
Yeah.
just really
That's
like a
relatable,
testament
isn't
to how,
it?
yeah. In his case,
Funny.
in his case, it's a testament to just being really good at everything he's doing, and everybody wants him to do more. That's really what it comes down to. So no, it's really cool. I'm really fortunate, and I guess totally random, not necessarily connected to this interview and what we were talking about, but in some of the previous episodes we've had, we've talked about some like advice for younger people in the conservation world, and I think that Nils and myself being friends and connecting and working together and being on the show today, it's kind of an example of how you just never know what you're going to get, right? And I mean, him and me met because I reached out to him. I sent a message when I saw he was doing the big year, and I was like, hey, if you're looking for a place in the Amazon, we'd be interested in having you. It'd be cool to host
So
your
cool.
time. And he just like, yeah, actually, I haven't decided. And we chatted, and the rest is history. And now, not only did he come, but we've worked together in the past, since then, and we're good friends now. And I guess it just shows, like, for someone out there who's like, should I try? Should I send a message? What do I do? Never hurts to just throw a line and see, so to speak. So I think it's one of the things that I often tell younger people in this field: just try, just reach out.
And don't be discouraged for a lack of answer too. Just keep trying. Because if someone's giving you a lack of answer, okay, then just move on, try someone else, because the good people will give you, at least some advice or a good connection to follow through with. So just keep trying.
Definitely.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm just to go back to the interview that we just done with the story. I liked his style of sort of 3 or 4 mini stories
Yeah,
as
yeah,
opposed to like the one big crazy one. I quite like that actually to mix it
yeah,
up. It's
yeah,
the first time we've had that. I, I
yeah, yeah,
I enjoyed that, the sort of like smaller ones and sort of just giving a little bit more an overview because he did so much in that year. I'm sure
yeah.
he could have chosen
Oh my
like
gosh.
any number of things, but it was nice to see like a little insight into a few different things actually.
Yeah, and I mean,
Gotta put that on.
he's right when he said his book is filled with that, and it's really, his book is not a field guide as much as it's more the experience of the whole, his
Mm.
whole journey.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of really interesting stories, and the whole thing is this one big story about that what it was like for his perspective and experiencing different areas and everything from the travel aspects and some of the cultural stuff down to like little aspects about the habitat and the life history of some of the species he was trying to identify. So yeah, it's definitely worth a read. It's a very consumable book, very interesting, and I think anyone who has interest in wildlife, in travel, anything like that, it's a really good book for someone to read. And really, like I said, very consumable. You pick it up and you could finish it pretty quick because it's really engaging, really interesting.
I'm
Cool.
excited to order it and put it on my
Yeah,
top
well, I need that in
pocket for
my
books.
life.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Need more
Okay,
books.
guys. Well, I guess we should wrap this one up. Another successful episode in the
Okay.
books, and yeah, we will see everyone. I guess next week with a guest that we have not determined yet.
Yeah, that's how it is.
That's all.
I think I know who it's gonna be. All
Might
right.
have an
See you guys
idea.
next week.
See you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Ciao.